Okay, well, I'm Terry Lohman, and Sally Gellert and I are co-chairs for UU's for a Just Economic Community. And we've invited Alan Collinge
I'm on the phone right now.
to talk
I'm
to
on
us
the phone.
tonight. I'm not sure what that was.
No, I apologize. I was telling my mother I'm on the
Oh,
phone. She couldn't. I had to say it 3 times for her to get it.
oh, okay.
I love my mother.
Good. Okay. Alan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Well, thank you. And thanks to the Unitarian Universalist Church for this forum here tonight. My name is Alan Collinge. I'm the founder of studentloanjustice.org. I've been fighting this fight first as an army of one back in starting 2005. And more recently, I'm happy that we now have over 1 million people in our group and who've signed our petition and so forth. And I guess the quick sort of 15-second spiel is that we are fighting for two things. We're fighting for the return of bankruptcy protections to all student loans. That really lies at the core of this issue. However, in more recent years, we've begun fighting for the cancellation by executive order, not by Congress, but by executive order of all student loans. And that's about 90% loan debt. So I'm really happy to be here. And maybe as a quick aside, I wrote a book called The Student Loan Scam with Beacon Press out of Boston, who just happens to be owned by the Universalist Unitarian Church. And as a sort of final point, they asked me to write the book in 2006 after I had been featured top story on 60 Minutes, and I was not a writer. I'm still today I don't myself as a writer. And so it was really kind of a very surprising thing that any publisher would ever ask me to write a book. And so when I was considering writing the book, didn't know anything about Beacon Press and so forth. And I found a quote from Albert Einstein going back to, I think, 1939 or something. And he remarked that the Universalist Unitarian Church, and in particular their press, their Beacon Press, deserves a huge amount of credit for the revitalization of the nation's constitution. And so, I am an aerospace engineer, as sort of scientist by training, and that is all I needed to see to decide, yeah, I'm going to write the book with Beacon.
Oh, how many people?
We're so glad.
Oh, can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. Just let me know when it's my turn, and how many people are out there in chat so I can say hello to you guys. Oh, would y'all like for me to contribute?
Sure. Tell us what's happening in Florida.
Okay. Well, the petition has over 1 million signatures. Okay. But the inherent nature of humans, I have to be realistic. We only have is it either 18,000 or 30,000? It's something much smaller, and the participation is lower. But I mean, it's really hard getting people involved because they're good about their day-to-day lives. But I'm focusing on the legal aspects, the practical economic aspects. And even though it was kind of unexpected, I threw in some information from 3 different religions that said it violated all 3 of the religion's golden rule, which is a little controversial when you mix politics and religion, but when they're all saying the same thing, it's kind of useful. And one of the people that was in Chuck Grassley's area, I provided her with my legal memo, which I had submitted to the Senate Judiciary Committee. Now, they didn't put it into the record, but I did ask them. And I participated in a whole bunch of high-profile cases, mainly representing myself on a various amount of topics. So I'm not a lawyer, but people probably think I am or something. So she found the religious information useful because no matter what a person's religion, you can say you're not doing what you're supposed to if you don't support student loan bankruptcy because it violates the golden rule. in these three different religions, but they all happen to agree. But the point of it is that Alan was very instrumental in teaching me the importance of bankruptcy defense, because when I was younger, I was thinking, well, if a person files bankruptcy, it'll cost money, but it actually saves money, because bankruptcy, think of it as the economic Second Amendment, the means of self-defense for the student. And Alan has righteously said that without the threat of bankruptcy, all these things happen. Public service loan forgiveness, 98 or 99% failure. That's the simplest thing in the world. Okay, you go in and you just serve your 10 years and you come out. I mean, how could 99% of all Americans be so stupid they can't even do that? So Marco Rubio, he's kind of a flippy floppy, somewhat conservative Republican, of one of my two senators in Florida. So he has some bill that has something about reducing fees. And a lot of members come to the national group. They say, well, why don't we just get rid of the interest and just pay the principal, which, in theory would be good. But look at here. Why has the student public service loan forgiveness have such a failure rate? Because when you remove the bankruptcy protection, the banks and the lobbyists and all the colleges and the lawmakers then get pulled in, because they're paid by the lobbyists in higher ed, the swamp. No matter whether you're conservative or liberal, most of the common people agree that college should either be free or affordable. We have a little differences. Most of the lawmakers in both parties, and the Republicans are a little bit worse on this issue. And I'm a Republican, I apologize. And because I agree with some of their views on the minimum wage being a little bit, for reasons that I think are righteous on that. But most of the lawmakers on both parties are bad because they're paid off. So
hey, Gordon, before we go too much further, most of the people, I think, at least Terry, I know, and I think Sally as well, don't have student loans. So let me back up for a minute and give everybody sort of the 30,000 foot view, so that you can sort of put this in a little bit of context. So the big picture here is that student loans really didn't exist for all intents and purposes in, say, 1960. They kind of did just a tiny amount.
Yeah.
But in 1965, Congress, LBJ, they created the Higher Education Act, which gave the government the framework to, at the time, not make loans, but rather to guarantee student loans for college. So the government would guarantee the loan, so that in case of default, the government would provide the banks with compensation for the loans. I might add, in 1965, when they signed the Higher Education Act, LBJ declared that the loans would be free of interest. So a lot has happened since 1965. Here we are in 2021, and as a nation, we owe about technically 1.8 trillion, at least according to the private banks and the Department of Education. But in actual fact, it's far more than that. It's over $2 trillion.
Yeah, that's closer to right. Yeah.
And so this has become something that the founding fathers had never even imagined, but the Congress of 1965, LBJ, never would have envisioned. Now, what has happened is this. Unlike every other loan, student loans have been uniquely stripped of the most fundamental protections, most notably bankruptcy protections. The founding fathers called for uniform bankruptcy laws in the Constitution. People like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Robert Morris, many others were being hurt badly under debt, predatory debt to British banks and merchants and friends of the king and so forth. So if you look at the list of enumerated congressional powers in the front of the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, near the top of that list is the call for uniform bankruptcy laws. That's, by the way, ahead of the power to declare war, ahead of the power to raise an army, ahead of the power to coin currency, create a judiciary. So this has been removed uniquely from student loans. Student loans are the only type of loan in our country that don't have the same uniform bankruptcy protections as all other loans. At the same time, student loans have also been stripped of what's called statutes of limitations, which is a time limit beyond which creditors cannot pursue borrowers. So while nobody likes to file for bankruptcy, it's certainly no picnic, and there are moral questions that arise on frankly, both sides of that issue. Nobody likes to skate on their debts, or maybe some people do. But I guess the point is the borrowers, as people, haven't changed very much over the years. Hopefully they have a little, and I hope for the better. What has changed is the lending system. It has violated the constitutional underpinnings of the country, and created a predatory lending system. And when I say predatory, I mean something very specific, and that is that it can be far more profitable for a loan to fall into default rather than to remain in good stead. So that's sort of a defining characteristic of a predatory lending system. And indeed, all of the players in certainly the federal student loan system have these perverse incentives. The collection companies, the servicers, all who are sort of one and the same with these very large corporate conglomerates, it turns out that they can make far more money on a defaulted loan than on a loan that remains in good stead. And in the absence of those consumer protections I mentioned, and by the way, in the presence of a very draconian collection regime that adds just tremendous amounts of penalties and fees onto the debt, what we're left with is essentially an inescapable bond of lifelong indenture. So the colleges benefit tremendously. About 90% of the loan proceeds go directly to the colleges, which is fine. But even the government has some very, I would say, immoral and corrupted motives for running this program. So unfortunately, we're sort of the living proof that the founders were onto something when they called for uniform bankruptcy laws.
Can I jump in here at some point?
Sure, go ahead.
But the something that's a fundamental fact that I didn't know for a long time, Alan, is that these old timers had pretty much close to free college. Some of the case they had free college. Rick Scott is a conservative. He's not a free handout liberal. Senator Rick Scott, Republican, he used to be our governor. He admitted, you can look up his news releases, he admitted that he had college at $200 a semester, which when it was translated, adjusted for inflation, was about $1,000 a semester. And that was actually high. A lot of people had it pretty close to free. So there was no student loans that were made or guaranteed by tax dollars because there were no student loans, period. And all these old timers, not all, but a lot of them were like, by God, I paid for my loan back when it was $50 a year, and you should pay for yours when it's $100,000 or something. And they don't get it until you pound it into their head. But when you pound it into their head, they get it. So when they started subsidizing the loans, the Bill Bennett hypothesis, subsidies, the colleges are like, oh, the student can take out deep loans. We have a sugar daddy. We can jack up and raise the tuition to match the increased borrowing ability. So the making or guaranteeing, in this case, it was guaranteeing first, and then we bought the loans. Making or guaranteeing the loans with tax dollars hurts the student because the tuition goes up, hurts the taxpayer because he's on the hook. Then the removal of the bankruptcy protections just put this into hyperdrive, because imagine you go into Chicago or some high crime area. Every time you get attacked, they remove your gun rights even more, thinking, oh, well, we wouldn't want them to tax them. It gets worse every time they make you more defenseless. The removal of bankruptcy protections is what caused this. And the old rule of the woods is you come out the same way you go in, or you might get stuck. Okay, I found that out the hard way one time. So putting the bankruptcy protections back will make it politically possible to push back the lobbyists. Why do you think Rick Scott, who really actually is a conservative, just about as conservative as me, why has he not tried to reduce or eliminate using tax dollars for spending? He runs his gator and says this. He's a very good speaker, very good. He admits tuition is a tax. He admits that we should cut subsidies. He admitted he was a free handout liberal. Why doesn't he do this? The lack of bankruptcy protections allows the lobbyists to rush in, and even someone like him that really wants to do this, rightly or for whatever reason, got his hair strangling him. So the returning of bankruptcy protections is sine qua non. It is the indispensable element. And Alan was the one that took 3 or 4 times to pound it into my thick skull. And these things like free college, reduced college, interest-free, where they work with you, public service loan forgiveness, all these things, they only happen with bankruptcy, and they won't happen without it. Yeah. Period. So, history tells us that.
And let me back up just a little bit again, Gordon, and just give people sort of the over, because I think most of the people here don't have student loans. So here's the big picture right now today. Well, first of all, in 2000, we owed maybe 150 billion in student loans, which at that time was a tremendous amount of money. Today, as I said, we're over $2 trillion. But the most important thing that people need to understand is that even before the pandemic, 80% of the 45 million federal student loan borrowers in the country were either not able to pay at all on their loans. That's about half, actually, or an additional 30% roughly were paying, but their loan balances were going up, not down. So even before this pandemic, we were looking at a default rate of something like 75%.
Yeah. Hold on. I can actually verify that on my website, which I might get permission to give out later on. This Congressional Budget Office noticed that we started losing money on student loans back in May of 2019, before the pandemic. Okay. And get this, John Rao, who testified for the HR 2648 committee. This is another student loan bankruptcy that Matt Gaetz actually supported, as conservative as he is. A lot of conservatives are on board, but we're not teaming up in the liberals. I mean, the bottom line is that the overhead costs, John Rao testified that the overhead costs for servicing the student loans in some cases was more than the actual, what they could get, the blood from the turnip. So, I mean, it's pretty bad. I'm just at a loss. I'm like Alan. I'm wondering why our petition has over 1 million signatures, and for some reason, my comment on his petition, there's no way you could cheat, is the second highest in the world. The second highest in the world. How many people like it? Like 200 something. Okay, 200 people out of 1 million. What in the world? And I want every person within the sound of my voice to call your 2 U.S. senators, look their number up. There's a way to do it. Don't be afraid. Call your member of Congress, your congressman, visit them in person, email them, go to their Facebook, tweet them, knock on the door. They know my first name. Only when we make our presence known, call them. Make your presence known repeatedly. Ask for them to support S2598, the student loan bankruptcy bill in Senate, fresh start for public loans, and HR 4907, that needs a Senate companion bill. And so the 2 student loan bankruptcy bills are the cornerstone, the sine qua non, the linchpin, the indispensable element, without which everything else, without those 2 things, the pork spending is going to happen. Betsy DeVos, former Secretary of Education, we were pretty sure she saw a column that I wrote in 11 days after my column. She repeated almost verbatim my claims that almost 10% of national debt is college debt. Okay. So we're going to crash the dollar if we don't cut the pork spending. We won't be able to.
Yeah, and again, for the benefit of the audience here, maybe we should back up a little bit and say that, this is a bipartisan problem. So politically, it sort of goes both ways. But honestly, as a practical matter, the Republicans in Congress have tended to oppose all manner of legislation that would, say, return bankruptcy protections to student loans, which Gordon just pointed out. And other critical fixes. And it is sort of ironic that here now today, we have a federal government that owns and controls 90% of these loans. So the Department of Education, if it were a bank, it would be the largest bank in the country based on the student loan portfolio. So this is a real big government problem. And, conservatives also typically claim to be sort of wary of the colleges and universities because of their liberal biases, et cetera. But yet, ironically, here we have the Republicans that at this point, they are essentially fighting for and defending this big government monstrosity, I like to call it, this catastrophe. And on the cost issue, also, it's important to note that the Department of Education is making a lot of money on this lending system. Some of the cost things that you said earlier, Gordon, are a little disingenuous, put out by people who work for the student loan system in some way, shape, or form. So LBJ said that these loans would be free of interest. Today, about $100 billion a year clicks off in interest alone on the nation's debt tab. Now, they collect something like, before the pandemic, something like $75 billion a year back from the borrowers. But at this point, in fact, as COVID was hitting, I've come to the conclusion that this is now a catastrophically failed lending system. There's no saving it. It has gotten too big. It's become too nationally threatening. So the subprime home mortgage default rate, by comparison, was about 20%. We are now looking at a default rate for federal student loans of something north of 80%. So by all rational metrics, even Wall Street economists should agree with me that this lending system has failed. It's done. This pandemic is probably the nail in the coffin. And in my humble opinion, and I hate to say this publicly because I don't like to fight the government, but truly, I think it is not only unwise, but it's also unpatriotic at this point for people to continue to pay into this lending system. This is really a very dangerous beast in our country. And if you consider that at this point, the majority of student loan borrowers are over 35, this is a senior issue. You start to realize that, oh, wow, this lending system is done. And I say to people, don't feel bad. It's not our fault. We the people haven't changed. What has changed is this lending system. So yeah, right now, Gordon is right. We're fighting the Republicans. They are coming around. The bill that Gordon just mentioned, S-2598, we now have more Republican co-sponsors on that bill than Democrats. It's probably not a condition likely to persist for long, but right now it's 2-1. We have John Cornyn, Josh Hawley as Republicans on the bill, and Senator Dick Durbin as the Democrat. So I'm hopeful, but I hope that the public in general realizes that lending systems fail from time to time, and this is what happened with federal student loans. Shouldn't feel bad. Lending systems do that from time to time. Look at the subprime home mortgage crisis. Look at the S&L scandal just in our country in our lifetime. But even going back to the days of Caesar, these artificial financial constructs have a way of blowing up.
Can I try to knock off a few more points before they escape my little pea brain head? In any event, though, Alan was saying that the students have paid back $1.22 for every dollar they borrowed, meaning right now the government has actually been repaid more. Some of the students have paid back 3 and 4 and 5 times.
Hey, Gordon, I have to interrupt you there. That $1.22 that you're referring to is for defaulted loans. So for a defaulted credit card, a credit card company typically will get back about 10 cents on the dollar for a defaulted account. Lenders don't like defaults. Defaults are supposed to be a bad thing. But for federal student loans, it turns out that the government gets back $1.22 for every dollar it pays out on default claims. So the government, because of their power, have found a way essentially to get blood from a stone or blood from a turnip or whatever the phrase is. Go ahead, Gordon.
Well, okay. Then I don't want to toot my own horn, and there's no way I can prove this, but right after I called Senator Josh Hawley's office in my capacity as news media, this is reporter Gordon Watts with the Register, National Director of Contract with America Part 2. I've taken over where Newt Gingrich has left off because he didn't finish the job there. And we want to do some news coverage, but your guy, Hawley, is not co-sponsoring the bill, but he supported it in committee big time. And like Forrest Gump that stumbles in and doesn't even know what he's doing, I'm kind of like that. Just hours later, Josh Hawley signs on as a co-sponsor. Now, I can't say the same as my 2 U.S. senators, and they're my senators. And you would think that they'd listen to me more than some guy way out there. But he signed on, and now the bill has 2 Republicans on it. And by the way, I'm a Republican, and I want to apologize for my party, which is bad on this. Now, the Democrats are better on this, but when the Democrats, both parties have had House, Senate, and Oval Office and have done nothing for anyone. So both parties are bad. This just happens to be a case where the Republicans are a little bit worse on this issue. But if it would be all right, my contract with America #2.com is a website. And I know you normally don't like me to throw it out, but I give you a lot of good press on the website, particularly if you click on the link where you do, there's 19 different states have more student debt than their entire state budgets. Federal debt exceeds the state budgets. And the issue about the CBO, there's a lot of things that I've compiled under that issue. And everything that's on there is an issue that I believe has at least 60% of support, like protecting the grid, which has nothing to do with the student loans. But if you want your 911 to work, you want your power company to work. Cutting the port spending, for example, is not always to do with student loans. But if you cut the subsidies, one of my best friends is a union Democrat. And so Alan was able to bail me out of a few good arguments. And my friend said, oh, and usually Democrats love student loan bankruptcy and then some. But this guy's kind of an outlier. He was like, no, your lawmakers are never going to cut the bankruptcy because then there was a sharp decline in student loans. They'd be afraid to lend to students. And there were the colleges would then be afraid to offer anything. They'd have to not give them to college. And so I went to Alan. So Alan reminds me, number one, the colleges did just fine without student loans on tax dollars, much less any student loans. Nowadays, the colleges are awash in money. If the students were not able to take out deep pocket loans from the taxpayer sugar daddy, that's the street term, but you know what I'm saying? They would lower the tuition to match the decreased borrowing ability. It would save the taxpayers and the students, and there would be no ifs, ands, or buts. They would most certainly do it. And so people need to realize that returning bankruptcy is not a free handout. Not that I'm against it. Since the colleges have been paid off by the taxpayers have been paid off by the students. We should cancel the loans. Simply say because there's a price gouging. It's huge. And let me tell you one thing.
So let me stop you there, Gordon. I know this is a little bit of inside baseball here, but so there's an important point to be made here. And this is political. So while the Republicans and the Democrats at this point seem to be on opposite sides, quite frankly, they really are not. We have a lot of people like to call it the uniparty in Washington, D.C., the establishment, as it were. And, Terry just commented that, Joe Biden, if he was smart, he would cancel student loans. And quite frankly, Joe Biden has got a lot of baggage in his closet. As a junior senator in 1970, he had his hand directly in the original legislation that initially restricted bankruptcy from student loans. And I could go on and on and on about him playing golf with Albert Lord, who's the chairman of Sallie Mae, and many other personal connections that he has. Yeah, don't even get us started. Sally mentions the Patriot Act. On and on and on. Joe Biden was not really a good guy. Before the election, he was saying things like, if you make less than $125,000 a year, I will eliminate your student loan debt. He actually said that. He said,
can I get in a quick tab about Rush Limbaugh?
Hold on a minute, Gordon. So at another point, he said that he was going to return bankruptcy protections to student loans. And at one point, he cavalierly declared that he would knock $10,000 across the board off of student loans on day one. So our group is pretty angry with Joe Biden right now. And strategically, we'll see what happens. But I don't know that there's enough time before the next election, Terry, to prevent the popular support among the 45 million student loan borrowers from hollowing out under President Biden. I think he's really got to do something a little sooner than that. And I think it starts with bankruptcy. And here's the good news. The good news is that Richard Cordray, who runs the federal student loan program, just yesterday, and after many, many urgings from myself, and I think probably Gordon as well, probably thousands of our members, Cordray, he said yesterday in congressional testimony that they are now looking very seriously at doing an executive order that might return bankruptcy protections to student loans. And guardedly, after 16 years of fighting this fight, I think we may see something very real from the administration in the next month. So
can I get in a hard jab about Rush Limbaugh? This is good, I promise you. So Rush Limbaugh is almost as conservative as me. We're way conservative. So I call him up to argue that student loan bankruptcy is conservative. And surprisingly, or maybe not, I don't know, that guy's kind of weird, or he was when he was alive. He doesn't come right out and support student loan bankruptcy, but he admits the system is a fraud. He does not oppose me at all on student loan bankruptcy like Sean Hannity or someone probably would. Sean Hannity is not truly a conservative. I disown the guy. Okay, so Rush Limbaugh, I told Rush Limbaugh that they removed bankruptcy from my existing loan contract. So all these old geezer that's like, by God, you knew what you were getting into. No, I didn't. I had bankruptcy as a safety net. They removed it from my existing contract. That violates contract law. How do you like it? Any people out there listening, how do you like if you bought a car? Part of the contract was it had brakes, it had a warranty on it that you could get repaired, and it had something else, whatever those three things were. When you buy the car, they take them away. Would anyone in their sane mind expect you to repay the loan if they violated the contract? They changed the terms, they broke the contract. So I think that you wouldn't know anything, or maybe you would owe something. So the change in the contract law, and so I'm Gordon Wayne Watts. You can Google Gordon Wayne Watts or Gordon Watts, and you can see some of the research that I've posted. And I devote a large, but not total amount. I've like some health and dietary stuff and scientific stuff about solar flares. But I mean, a large part of my website is the conservative argument. Now, even though the students have repaid the loans completely and the taxpayers have repaid the colleges, okay, and they should collapse the system, I'm one of those nutty conservatives that's still kind of against it. But let me tell you one thing. If my lawmakers, and I'm going to tell them to their face, if they do not do the student loan bankruptcy, subsidy cuts, and price controls like we do with utilities or something, I'm going to march into the head Democrat office, put on my Sunday best, look that big donkey in the eye and say, our Republicans can't get it done. You guys can have all the free handouts, loan forgiveness, college. Not forgiveness is a wrong word because the students did not commit a sin, okay? But I'm saying cancellation would be a better term. I'm going to tell these guys because cancellation of the loans without lending the loan system would be like freeing some of the slaves without ending or abolishing slavery, and Abe Lincoln would turn over in his grave. So yeah, it would be kind of good, but some people would get forgiven too much, some too little. But the system right now, normally it'd be kind of good to have people just have the reset the thing back to the principal and not the interest. But that would not happen because it's such a bureaucratic nightmare. We can't even get something simple done. I'm getting fed up with the system, and I'm an easygoing person. I'm looking more and more at the student loan cancellation, even though I'm against it. Why do all that? But at this point, the system should just be taken to bath and drowned, as Alan says all the time. Hey, is anyone out there listening? You can ask me a question. I'll try to answer it.
Yeah, and let me just step in here again. Again, for the benefit of our audience, a few things they may not be aware of. So conservatives love to talk about this problem as being one that benefits, where student loan cancellation would benefit largely these liberal elitist students, these Antifa anarchist protesters and so forth. But this is just massively wrong. So here are the demographics of the student loan issue. 40% of these 45 million people, they never graduated from college. So these are not your sort of elites. These are your Uber drivers, your trade people, etc. And speaking of which, I might add that about millions, 5-10 million people have gone to trade schools. And yes, trade schools also have student loan debt associated with them.
Older people and Black people both are very badly affected.
Yeah, I was just getting to that, Gordon. You don't need to interrupt, okay?
I apologize.
Thanks. So there are a lot of different ways to intersect this problem. Over half of all borrowers are over the age of 30. A lot of people say, oh, this is a younger person's problem. No. Over half of borrowers are over the age of 35, I should have said. There are more people with student loans over the age of 50 than under the age of 25 with student loans. And that's just sort of a mind blower. But, people need to realize also in fact, all federal student loan borrowers were determined to be financially needy as a precondition for getting the loans. So this sort of myth that conservatives, defenders of the lending system, they like to spin in the zeitgeist about this being a young person's issue, a liberal issue, and they try and turn their sort of red Republican base against the borrowers. It's just 100% wrong. The last thing I will say on this point is that it turns out that red states are being decimated by these loans far worse than blue states. So Gordon mentioned earlier, there are over a third of states in this country where student loan debt now exceeds the entire state budget. So like Georgia, for example, the state budget of Georgia is $48 billion. The people of Georgia owe $82 billion in student loan debt. And the numbers are similar for states like Florida, Texas, Alabama, North and South Carolina, Tennessee, Indiana, Missouri, Ohio, South Dakota, and a few others. But so this is hurting red states. This should not be a partisan issue.
Can I ask a quick question? Terry mentioned in chat, he said that the states have been having cut off their funding or reduced the funding to the colleges. I don't know if this is true or not. I can't quite remember. In other words, if the state, I think the states have plenty of funding, but I just don't know. Of course, if they reduce the funding, then the student would get charged more. So is Terry correct in his assertion that the states have cut off state funding, thereby placing more of a burden on students?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I've looked up the Bergen County Community College budget, and you can see the decrease in state funding that goes right up with the increase in the student tuition, therefore the loans, and the whole cycle.
Yeah, this is an interesting question. If you talk to any state legislator, they'll say, no, we have not decreased funding for colleges. Year over year, the amount of dollars that the state legislation, will increase college funding in their budget. Indeed, it does increase roughly with inflation over time. But colleges have grown tremendously, and their associated costs have grown tremendously. So where 30 years ago the states were providing let's say half of a college's funding, today the states are providing a far lower percentage of the college's budget. So it's a very difficult problem. The colleges have been expanding greatly, and quite frankly, colleges have been sort of sitting in the catbird seat on this issue quite a lot. But ultimately, I think the lending system is going to fail, folks. I think that 2 years from now, I don't think that we're going to have a federal student loan system. I think that even after this pandemic ends, or whenever they begin requiring people to repay their student loans again, I don't think even 20% of the people are going to resume making payments on their loans. So I just don't see this lending system continuing, certainly not in its current form, for any longer at all. I think the pandemic is the nail in the coffin. We would like to
address the wage garnishment issue that was brought up by my friend. He said that they would force the money out of them through wage garnishment.
Yeah, but it's not realistic to imagine that the federal government is going to garnish the wages of 38 million people. They don't. It's just not going to happen. And by the way, it's not that hard to avoid wage garnishments. So, by law, the collection powers that people have are strong, but the facts are the facts. And before the pandemic, 50% of everyone was unable to pay. They couldn't pay. There was no wage to garnish. And so it's just a matter of reality that probably 80% of the people are not going to resume paying on their student loans. And quite frankly, I think that's a good thing. I think it's the right thing. Yeah, I think this lending system has become a national threat at this point, and probably the most unwise and least patriotic thing that anybody could be doing right now is throwing good money into this very bad lending system.
I want to address the point that was raised about the funding. Part of the reason that the funding has been weaker is because they have like gymnasiums and research studies and statutes and all kind of these programs that really don't need. The other thing, though, is that they have more students coming in, and even though students pay money, they don't pay money completely commensurate. So there is a little bit of good, valid argument to the fact that, yeah, we're certain, but not everyone needs to go to a 4-year college. That can adjust too. So the bottom line is the colleges are awash in money. They're ripping off the taxpayer and the student, and the taxpayers and the students are arguing with one another. And we should be arguing with the colleges and the lawmakers and the lobbyists. We should call on the phone. Every person should go and look up their congressmen and their senators. Call them. Get the bill S-2598 is headed towards markup real soon. Senate Bill 2598, the Fresh Start Student Loan Bankruptcy Bill by John Cornyn, Republican, Dick Durbin, Democrat, Josh Hawley, Republican. It only has 3 people that are senators on it. And the other bill, it's a private bill. It's much less important. It has 3 Democrats. So why these Al Lord himself, the evil devil himself, admitted that his grandson had like a 100,000 or something like that, and it was like untenable. And yet our congressman, Senator Marco Rubio, has huge college debt. Does he care? No. I don't know, what is the crazy or something?
Yeah, it's funny. Albert Lord, who's the chief architect of this lending problem, as we see it today, chairman of Sallie Mae, etc. He was actually bitching, pardon my French, the other day in the newspaper about the high prices that he had to write checks for his grandchildren's college. And I was just thinking to myself, this is a lot like Henry Ford complaining about the traffic. So it's the ironies are never ending. But Gordon mentions S2598, and the folks out there, I agree. This is the most important piece of legislation we have ever had to fight for in the history of our organization. We may see Joe Biden do an executive order returning bankruptcy any day now, but we've got to have Congress return these protections that the founding fathers called for so prominently in the Constitution. Only then, with the threat of bankruptcy back on our side, only with the threat of bankruptcy can we have confidence in the lending system to behave in with the minimum amount of good faith. When you take away bankruptcy, you invite the lenders to become thieves and bandits, and that's what's happened. One last point on this legislation is the fact that Dick Durbin is the sponsor of this bill. He is also chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. So while there's only 3 people on the bill, Senator Durbin, at least on paper, has all the votes that he needs, not only to get this bill out of committee, but up for a successful vote in the Senate. So things are breaking very quickly. I'm very excited. And after 16 years of being a voice in the wilderness, we are very, very close to finally getting this problem solved. And so these next couple of months will be very interesting.
How many people out there are listening to us, and how do they ask questions? I love talking and I love listening, but I'm naturally talkative. You know that. I don't want to step off on the wrong foot and just go too far. Terry Lumen says it used to be if the bank loaned you money, you could be fairly sure. Oops, it disappeared. I couldn't read it fast enough.
It shouldn't have disappeared. If the banks would loan you money, you could be fairly sure that you could afford the loan.
Yeah.
And in the last 20 years, all bets are off. They'll loan money to people who they know there's no way in hell they're ever going to pay. They don't have the income or anything, which is
that's predatory lending. The housing bubble was bad, and people did not blame those poor suckers, even though some of them were wrong. They blamed the banks and the government for making the banks loan money to people that couldn't pay back. But now the students are much worse. Price gouging, the principal of loan. When the cost of college has increased much faster than inflation, all these idiots, pardon my language, these moron idiots, blowhard, big mouth. Oh yeah, well, everything's gone up. Yeah, everything's gone up, but the cost of college have gone up way faster. And it used to be you're old enough to remember you could work a little part-time job over the summer. You could go to college. Nowadays, you work 3 jobs and you keep paying on it, and you'll never pay it off. Maybe if you win the lottery or if you're in a rich family. That is evil, whether you have a religion or not, or even anywhere in between. That is inherently evil, and yet we're not standing up. I would like for every person to go to GordonWatts.com, GordonWayneWatts.com, contract with America 2. Got to put the number 2.com. Go to studentloanjustice.org. You go to Facebook and put in student loan justice. Okay, get in with our groups. My websites have stuff that's not related. Just you can ignore it or whatever. It doesn't matter. We have to call every single congressman and senator. All these bills for adjusting interest rate and fees, well-meaning or not, public service loan forgiveness had a 99% failure rate, 98 or 99. Yeah, because there was no student loan bankruptcy to enforce it. We need the student loan bankruptcy bill S2598. And also, if you have extra time, HR 4907, the private student loan bankruptcy bill was in the House. Those bills need companion bills in the other chamber, and they need a lot of people to jump on and talk about them and make a bill into a law, like Schoolhouse Rock. Make the bill climb up Capitol Hill.
Yeah, our logo for student loan justice for even today and for many years was that bill. I'm just a bill. Was that cartoon?
Yeah.
And it's true. There's one key distinction here, though, Gordon. We need Congress to return bankruptcy protections to student loans, but as in terms of loan cancellation, which at this point is frankly inevitable, it is not good for Congress to be given the burden of canceling these loans because Congress is limited by pay-go rules. So to cancel $1 in student loans congressionally, you have to raise $1. So to cancel $1.6 trillion in federal student loan debt,
That's
you would
right.
have to raise $1.6 trillion in taxes or cut from other programs, et cetera. There's no good reason for that because the taxpayers already own 90% of all student loans.
We paid the loans. We paid the colleges. We paid off.
We funded the loans many years ago, and we, the taxpayers, now own those loans. There's no good reason for the taxpayers to have to pay, first of all, let's say a few $100 billion for some loans. The loans inflate to nearly $2 trillion, and then to have to pay again this $2 trillion to cancel these loans. It's ridiculous. It's nonsensical. The president can cancel these loans tomorrow without needing congressional approval, without needing one dime from the federal treasury, and without adding even one penny to the national debt.
Yeah.
There's no easier or cheaper way to cancel the loans and stimulate the economy. It's just, look at all the PPP loans and all the various pandemic stimulus that we just put out to the country. All of that stuff added to the national debt required money to be drawn from the treasury. Student loans are very unique in that they can be wiped away tomorrow with none of that overhead.
The bases are loaded. Can I knock it in for a home run? Because I can definitely knock it in for a home run.
Go for it, Gordon.
If the president were to cancel student loans, two things. First off, he does have people are like, oh, he don't have the authority. I'm a conservative and I really don't favor cancellation, even though the students were genuinely ripped off. But I researched it. I'm very smart. Trust me. You can Google Gordon Wayne Watts and see. All right. He has the authority under the 1965 Higher Education Act. Most legal scholars actually will agree with me. He has the authority to cancel the loans, period. He was given that authority statutorily. Not people like the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, you're not telling the truth. Secondly, and most importantly, what Alan said was true. If the Congress does it, there's pay-go. You have to raise $1 in taxes or cut some spending or something like that there. If the president does it, it'd be like me forgiving Alan. Let's say Alan owes me $1 million. If I forgave Alan $1 million, I could forgive it to him and it wouldn't cost anyone anything. I just forgive him. He would stop paying a couple of pennies every year or something. Okay, but it wouldn't cost anything because pay-go does not apply to the president doing that. And that is what people don't understand. Now, Sally raised a question about the difference between private and public. If the president cannot forgive private loans, but bankruptcy defense can go with private and public. That's the short answer.
Yeah, that's right. Private loans are going to be difficult. I'll just tell people out there right now, there's very little Congress to do. The one thing is, as Gordon says, that can be done for private student loans is undo what, quite frankly, Joe Biden and others did in 2005, which is make private student loans different from all other loans in bankruptcy proceedings and lump them in with federal student loans. This was one of the worst tricks that was ever played on the American public, by the way. The banks, they go to Congress and they said, oh, we don't have bankruptcy for federal loans. Take bankruptcy away from private loans, and it will allow us to lend to more needy students. So we're such good guys as banks. So Congress went ahead and acceded to that request, took bankruptcy away from private student loans, and instead of lending to more needy borrowers, no, they didn't do that. Instead, they started demanding credit-worthy cosigners, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, who had real property to come after. They started demanding these people cosign on over 90% of their new loans. So this has destroyed families across the country. People who thought they were being very generous in helping their son, daughter, niece, nephew out, all of a sudden find out they have to cash in their retirement to bail their relative out of debt that maybe began at a reasonable amount, $20,000, but exploded to, over $100,000 with penalties and fees.
What
So-
really offended me about it was that it funded non-profit, for-profit schools that were poop as far as what they were going to give the student. And if they have bankruptcy protection, you can be sure the banks would not have been loaning to Corinthian colleges or whatever, those junk education places.
You're exactly right, Terry, and you hit on a very important point. The founding fathers wanted uniform bankruptcy laws not so everybody could run out and skate on their debt. They wanted it so that the lenders would behave in good faith, which means don't lend too much money to somebody who can't afford it, which is precisely what's happening today. Don't hope for someone to default so you can come and take their farm from them. That's bad faith lending. And that's what happened to Thomas Jefferson, even George Washington, even Robert Morris spent time in a debtor's prison back in the 1700s. So this is exactly the sort of a predatory feeding frenzy that the founders wished to avoid when they called for uniform bankruptcy laws. The lending systems failed. At this point, the best thing to do for all purposes is just cancel the loans and let's start over. Maybe we as the richest country in the world can afford to send our people to public college for free, like they do in most other parts of the civilized world. I don't know. We're agnostic as a group on that question. But what I do know is that this current lending system it's done by all rational metrics.
Can I address the one point that my friend raised and you straightened me out? My friend was like, well, we can't remove the bankruptcy protection. Students would be without loans, which we proved was false. But he said, well, we should redo the entire system. So Alan pointed out in private chat, if a person's house was on fire, his life was in danger. Okay, you got to do something. Are you going to take time and build a brand new house to put them in? No, you're going to rush in and do what you can to drag them out. Student loan bankruptcy defense, possible use of price controls, or just something quick and easy. Okay, something like the subsidy cuts if they become politically viable. Student loan bankruptcy would be snatching them out of the fire, at which point later you could do something. So that is the correct answer. And I have to give Alan kudos for straightening my mind out once again and getting the facts straight.
Well, you know what? While we're tooting our own horns here, Gordon, I will maybe I don't know if it's a brag, but so we were the group, actually, Gordon included. Our group, we were the people that started the petition before anybody was talking about loan cancellation by executive order. So in March 2020, right as COVID was setting in, we started this petition, and we were a voice in the wilderness for months and months and months, calling for loan cancellation by executive order. Well, we started getting really big. We started blowing up in the media. And then lo and behold, come September, when we're over 500,000 signatures on our petition, Senators Elizabeth Warren and Chuck Schumer literally embraced the concept and introduced a bill into Congress calling on the president to cancel student loans by executive order. So we're just thrilled that our work is finally being taken seriously by the establishment. We're a strictly nonpartisan group, as Gordon mentioned. We would love to see a few Republican governors, for example, stand up where the Republicans in Congress will not, and join us. I mean, the governor of Georgia, Brian Kemp, he should be standing up and saying, Mr. President, I will not let my great state of Georgia, which was founded as a refuge for imprisoned debtors, by the way, I will not let my state be conquered and enslaved by this federal debt, Mr. President.
I have a question that I don't know the answer.
Sorry, let me just finish the point. So if we can get even one Republican governor to fight for their people over the federal government, I think that we'll see a politically unprecedented groundswell in this country. I think everything will change. And so we're fighting very hard to get a Republican governor on our side.
Right.
Okay,
Shelley mentions forbearance, and I have a friend who just started law school, and she's kind of aware of things, and she wanted to pay off while she attended. They immediately were going to put her into forbearance, keep the interest running while she was in school, so she would get out with a bigger debt. She fought, she won, but yeah, if she didn't know.
Yeah, it's ridiculous the games that are played behind the scenes. You know, these loans are licenses to steal, and there's very little. In fact, there's almost no legal recourse on the part of the borrowers most times. So that's why we see just cartoonish statistics like what I've said tonight. We see a 99% rejection rate for all of the loan forgiveness programs. I know we're seeing recent media about how great Biden is for improving the public service loan forgiveness program. Well, we'll see if that's true, but I can say that historically, of the millions of people who have tried for the various federal loan forgiveness programs, 32 people, like enough people they'd easily fit in my living room, are the number of people out of those millions who have actually qualified for the loan forgiveness promise through these historical programs. So I would love to trust the government, but I will only trust the government and its contractors to run this lending system fairly with the threat of the bankruptcy protections that the founding fathers demanded. Maybe my last point tonight would be that I don't think that we will see meaningful loan cancellation unless and until we get this constitutional threat of bankruptcy return. Very important point.
I just have one comment and one question, if I could, please. My comment is that all these old geezers like, well, no one made you go to college. If you know you didn't have to go to college, if their heart attack or something was happening, they would either get the operation, even if it required huge loans, or they would die. Students have no real choice. Used to be you could get a job with a diploma or something, a career job. Now you have to have a college degree. Students have either no choice to either go to college or be a bum, is what everyone tells them. That's mostly true. So that's the defense. Now, my question is, you and I all agree that the student loan bankruptcy is not as flashy or glamorous, but it's more important. How come your petition did not get 1 million signatures? And I don't know the answer to this. Why couldn't we get 1 million signatures simply on bankruptcy? I've tried it and I got 301 signatures.
I know. We've done dozens of petitions in the past. And when you ask for bankruptcy, about 31 people actually will sign. It's not a very easy thing to ask people to, publicly stand up. A lot of people don't even tell their spouses, their friends and family about their student loan issues. So debt is just a very personal, shameful issue in the first place anyhow. And to ask people to stand up and fight for the right to do something as unpleasant as file for bankruptcy, it's just psychologically, it's a very, very difficult push.
Well, could I throw you a lifeline here on a fist bump and help you out? If a lot of them are conservatives like me, what you do is you say, look, brother, you want your Second Amendment rights, you want your defense rights, your gun rights. Why are you taking the economic Second Amendment, which is not in the amendments? By God, it is in the articles. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 4, the uniformity clause. If you don't want your gun rights, why are you taking that student's defense rights? Bankruptcy defense is enshrined upon the Constitution, and if you violate that, you're against the Second Amendment, you're against the Constitution, and you're a sorry, fake conservative. That's about as good a defense as you can get. Hey, man, I think someone owes me something.
Well, and also at this point, I think Terry mentions people are not starting families here. This is not a problem on paper. This is a very real problem in the country where the people are being wrecked. People aren't starting families. They're not starting businesses. They're not buying houses. I mean, these are normal things that normal people do. And so, there's a great fiscal economic stimulus argument to be made. But, thankfully, as far as the political dynamics go today, with loan cancellation now a top campaign issue in the presidential campaign, thanks to us, and also, at the top of the news nationally, that really puts bankruptcy in the proper place, which is sort of the moderate middle ground. And so, we're very hopeful. The next, I think, month is going to be very, very interesting. Things are happening quickly, and I just urge people to keep an eye out on this space. Check back at studentloanjustice.org and help us if you can.
Yeah, a few years ago, I was working with Crowd Rescue HQ on hurricanes Harvey and Maria, and one of the people I was kind of working with remotely kind of admitted, well, I'm living in my parents' basement. I have these student loans. And I kind of went, oh, what we've done to your generation. And he said, Thank you. So many people, he knows I'm a boomer. He said, so many people your age just don't get it. It's not what it was, and it's wrong.
That's our number one challenge, Sally. It truly is. People with their own life history who went to college in the 70s, maybe early 80s, they just don't understand how bad things have gotten. It's hard to really understand when you're not in it. So our number one challenge is just communicating to older people, to people who'd never been to college, that no, guys, this is not a free giveaway. This is correcting a problem that should have never started in the first place.
Can I make one little emotional?
It will probably always be a tough fight for us because some people just don't care.
A friend of mine said, he had $4,000 when he got out of college in loans in the 70s. And after 4 years, it was paid off. No big deal. But that's not what it is now.
Yeah, the average undergrad is now leaving college with something like $39,000 or maybe $40,000 on average in student loan debt.
And Robin's 4,000 would be about 18,000, so it's at least double, and that's
it's at least doubled. Yeah, at least doubled. And remember, the wages have not gone up commensurate with that increase.
Yeah, job market is way worse than it was then.
But it's even worse than that, Sally, because it's not just the principal. We have people on our groups who borrowed maybe $10,000, have repaid something like $20,000 on a $10,000 loan, and still owe like $30,000, $40,000.
Yeah, they got you into putting it into forbearance and keeping the interest running, and then they apply the payments to the interest and let the principal go on. They got all kinds of scams.
They have all kinds of ways to inflate a loan, most notably through default. If you default on a loan, that loan can easily double in just a few years, 3-4 years with penalty.
Can I make one very strong closing commentary? All these old timers, not all old time, I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but I'm like, they don't understand it. I think what we should do is tell the old timers, look, your college was either free or real close to it. If you have sons, grandsons, and great grandchildren, they will never be able to afford to be doctors. That's how come like almost all of your, and I love people from other countries, almost all of your specialists are from Pakistan, from India, from Egypt, and from places like Cuba. And there's nothing against these people. Your kids and your grandkids are being, you are hating your kids and your grandkids by making sure that college remains unaffordable and impossible unless you win the lottery or you're rich. You use that argument a couple of 2 or 3 times, it will knock them out, which they should be knocked out.
Well, that's right. People have their varying opinions on the value of college. I think maybe some of the haters have a point in that, in 1960, if you wanted to be a nurse, you showed up to a hospital, you changed bedpans for a few months, and after 6 months or a year, bam, you're a nurse. Today, you pretty much need a master's degree to be a nurse from the get-go. And I could say that on many other industries. So maybe the colleges have they have maybe grown a little bit outside of what's appropriate for the country. I don't know.
A little?
Yeah, somehow people think of, the HR departments like to see the credentials because that way they don't have to think, they just check off boxes and whatever. So if you've got the degree, they don't have to.
Next time.
But
the current time,
in my family, education was not about getting the job. It was about becoming an educated person, and everybody should be able to afford that. It shouldn't be a luxury for those who have enough money.
I totally agree with you, Sally. An educated citizenry is a better country. Maybe you can't quantify that. Maybe you can't put that on a financial ledger. But, even, the bartender down the street, if he has a master's degree, he's probably a little more interesting fellow to talk to. So the benefits of having an educated citizenry go way beyond dollars and cents. And there's no good reason that we as a nation can't afford to educate our citizenries up to the levels appropriate to their ambition. I don't see what the holdup should be. Look at every other country civilized in the country, Norway, Sweden, Germany, I could go on and on. Higher education has a value, but right now the financing system behind everything is finished. And I hope that we can come up with a far better way to do this.
Now, don't everybody
So
call.
what's next for student loan justice?
Well, time will tell. I mean, in a perfect world, we would like to see Joe Biden return bankruptcy by executive order in the next month. We would like to see Congress return bankruptcy this session, so in the next year. And ultimately, we would like to see these loans canceled entirely. And in that case, I will take this banner behind me down and either throw it in the trash or give it to a museum or something, and I will move on with my life as and the rest of the country will be able to move on. That's our goal, and so we'll see. But I know that it's not gonna fall into our laps. We've got a lot of very, very hard work, and there's going to be quite a few battles to be fought.
You raised a point. I want to just go ahead and validate what you're saying. People don't usually talk about Joe Biden canceling student loans because usually it's legislative. The same Higher Education Act that gives him the right to completely erase the debt that's federally held, that is, actually gives him plenary and complete authority over anything in the student loan system. He can modify the thing. He could actually, as long as he's president or whoever, he could use his executive order authority to order the Secretary of Education to not oppose any student loan bankruptcy filings in bankruptcy court, which would effectively do the same thing. But then if you get another president, or if Joe Biden gets into a bad mood or anything, if his pen runs out of ink and he can't sign the executive order, okay, then the lawmakers need to pass this in law. But yes, he actually has the authority to cancel the loans or to modify them or to not oppose them in bankruptcy. But the broader picture is that we as a nation have not done what we're supposed to. We have allowed this. Talking to people is hard, even when they have kids and grandkids, and it's hurting them. People play games instead of picking up the phone. We have 1 million people that signed our signature or signed our petition. How many people are calling Senator Marco Rubio, Senator Rick Scott, former governor of Florida, Congressman C. Scott Franklin, a Republican supposed to support the Constitution and fiscal conservative? How many people are calling these Fruit Loops? And the Democrats, I think, are worse, but on this issue, they're better. So we're not going to argue it's bipartisan or nonpartisan. How many people are calling them, picking up the phone? How hard is it to pick up the phone? You guys are the cool crowd. I'm sure that you guys will, but how many people are going to see this video? I hope it's 1 million, and I hope every single one burns the phone lines up.
I know you've got a great email list, and I see your daily actions, and I try and take a bunch of them. I don't do them all, but I do.
We appreciate it, Sally. And politics is local. Every political act starts with one person. It truly does. I know it sounds cliche, but I'm telling you guys, we've been fighting this battle for 16 years. And when everybody out there expects somebody else to pull their weight for them, nothing happens. The larger a group you get, the more that phenomenon sets in, where people are like, oh, we got 1 million people, so we're good. I can sit back and eat popcorn and watch everything happen. No. That will never work. It's never worked. And the bad guys, the people who are foisting this lending scam upon us, they love to inflame the flames of intransigence. I don't want to say laziness, but inaction, I'll say. And that's just so dangerous. People need to own this problem and fight.
Sorry.
Well,
Man.
it's 1:15. Do we have any more questions? I'd like to thank Alan and Gordon for participating in this lively discussion. With only 6.
Question.
Yeah.
How many people were participating in the discussion that could either ask questions or watch live? I'm just kind of, because I can't see it on my end.
Well, there's 6 people in the room, and we're on Facebook Live, and I know there's at least one person in there. So, but the recording will be there, and it wouldn't surprise me there'll be 20 or 30 people who've seen it by next week.
Send me a link, man. I'm the one and only Gordon Wayne Watts.
Well, it's easy. It's it's Facebook /UUJEC.
Oh, cool.
The Universal and Unitarian Church. You guys are doing a good. That's not my religion, but you guys are truly followers of God, I believe. So I want to thank you guys.
Well, and as I opened with, I'll close with the fact, quote from Albert Einstein: "The Universalist Unitarians and their Beacon Press deserve a huge amount of credit for the revitalization of this nation's constitution." So keep going.
I'm sure you're aware that it was Beacon Press that published the Pentagon Papers
Yes.
50 years ago. Yep,
Yes.
we've been out there. Well, thank you very much. I'm gonna close this out now.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks
Thank
all.
you.